Welcome to CINEPRO, where we bring your favorite movies back to life with quick recaps, hidden details, and everything you missed. The movie begins with a boy named Will struggles to discover his powers despite being the son of two heroes, Steve and Josie, who are known as the Commander and Jetstream. While he's preparing for his first day of high school, which will be at a school for superhero kids, Will tries to lift some weights to see if he has super strength like his dad, but he's unable to move the barbell at all. As he notices his dad coming to his room, Will adds more weights to the barbell to deceive Steve so that he'd think his son has super strength. After Steve enters his room, he commends Will for the work he's putting into building more muscle and testing his strength. He also says he's proud that his son is attending his alma mater for his high school education. He adds that knowing Will has powers just like him makes him confident that if anything happens to him or his wife, his son will still be able to save the world. Shortly after, Steve and Will head down for breakfast, and they see Will's best friend, Layla, already waiting for him so they can go to school together. Suddenly, Steve gets a call from the mayor, who informs him that there's a giant robot wreaking havoc in the city. Even though Josie had expected to walk Will to the bus for his first day in high school, she eventually leaves the house with Steve to fight the giant robot. Meanwhile, Layla also appears to have the power to control plants because one of her parents is a superhero. Before she heads to school with Will, they watch the news and see the Commander and Jetstream take down the monster. As the Commander celebrates, he also picks up a souvenir from the giant's body, which he plans to add to his collection. Just then, Will and Layla leave the house and enter the school bus to their new school named Sky High. As Will enters the bus driver, Ron, asks for his name, and as he says it, the man realizes that he's the son of the Commander and Jetstream. He then tells two kids, Ethan and Magenta, to stand up from their seats so that Will and Layla can replace them. Magenta doesn't get why Will deserves special treatment, but Ethan willingly stands up and says he's happy to give up his seat to the son of the world's strongest heroes. However, Will tells him not to worry because he already has plans to sit near his other friend, Zach. Just then, Will sits beside Zach, and the boy starts talking about how his parents kept pressuring him to discover his powers. Will believes they're alike, but as he asks if Zach still doesn't have any powers, his friend says he already has one. Will is disappointed by this, and he starts thinking of what to do when he's told to show his powers at Sky High. Suddenly, Ron drives past a closed road and straps the kids in their seats before turning on the bus turbo engines, which he uses to fly them to Sky High. The kids are scared on the trip, but as they eventually get close to their destination, Ron explains that Sky High is a school in the sky kept aloft by the latest technology in anti-gravitational propulsion. He eventually parks the bus on the school's premises, and as all the kids get down, Ron gives Will his card so that the boy can call him whenever he needs a ride. As the kids then head toward the main building, two bullies, Lash and Speed, try to extort them. But the student body president, Gwen, shows up and tells the boys to leave the newcomers alone. Following this, she welcomes Will and the others to Sky High. While she's talking about taking them for a tour of the school, Will can't seem to take his eyes off her, and it turns out that he already has a crush on her. Shortly after, Gwen takes them around the school, and as they finally get to the school's auditorium, the school principal, Mrs. Powers, appears in the room and welcomes the kids. She also mentions that they'll soon have to take their power placement test. As Will wonders what she's talking about, Ethan explains that it's a placement test which will allow students to be categorized either as a hero or a sidekick. After Principal Powers leaves, a coach named Boomer enters the hall and tells the kids that he's in charge of the power placement. He then mentions that each one of them will be given the opportunity to showcase their powers to determine whether they're worthy of being heroes or sidekicks. Following this, he calls on a boy named Larry to showcase his powers first, and as he turns into a super strong stone figure, Boomer places him as a hero. After this, Zach climbs the stage even though he's not called next. He doesn't seem to do anything, and as Boomer looks confused, Zach says he can glow in the dark. He also tells Boomer to turn off the lights so that he'll see how useful his power is, but the coach just places him as a sidekick. Next up, Ethan turns into a slimy liquid, and this gets him a spot as a sidekick. Boomer also places Magenta as a sidekick, after it turns out that she's a shapeshifter who can only turn into a guinea pig. Following this, Boomer calls Layla to show her powers next, but she says she only likes using her powers when necessary. Boomer says it's necessary because of the placement test, but as Layla argues that she doesn't like the idea of making people heroes or sidekicks based on their powers, the coach gets pissed and places her as a sidekick. He then tells the kids to go for a break and that when they return, he'll continue the placement test with Will. Following this, the kids head to the cafeteria to have lunch, and Zach complains about his placement as a sidekick despite having a useful power. As they sit down at the table, Will notices a boy named Warren staring at him, so he mentions this to his friends. Layla and the others then tell him that Warren likely hates Will because the commander sent the boy's dad to jail for committing a crime. After they're done with lunch, Will bumps into Gwen with his friends. He looks quite nervous around her because he likes her, and Gwen seems to notice it too. She then asks if he would like to join the homecoming committee as a representative of the freshmen. Will says he would love to, and Gwen mentions that they'll talk about it later. Shortly after, Will goes into the restroom and sees Lash and Speed bullying Ethan. After Ethan eventually leaves, Lash and Speed assume that Will has been placed as a hero, so they ask if he would like to bully sidekicks with them. Will doesn't seem interested in this, but he tells them what they want to hear so they can leave him alone. After a while, Will returns to the auditorium for his placement test, but as he climbs the stage, he doesn't know what to do. He then whispers to Boomer that he doesn't have powers, but the coach reveals what he said out loud and thinks he's joking. He instantly drops a car on Will to see if he has super strength, but the boy almost gets crushed. As he tries to explain that he has no powers, Boomer bumps him off the stage to see if he can fly like his mom, but again, Will lands badly on the floor. Boomer then tells him to stop playing around, but Will says he really doesn't have any powers. Even though Boomer is surprised that the son of the world's greatest heroes has no powers, he shouts at Will and calls him a sidekick. Later that day, Will goes to the clinic for a checkup to see if he broke any bones after Boomer's test. After checking on him, the nurse tells Will that he's fine, but the boy seems unhappy that he has no powers. He then asks if the nurse already called his dad to tell him, but she says she doesn't want to be the one who breaks such news to the commander. Will still looks unhappy and asks the nurse if it's normal. The woman says it is, and that he might just be a late bloomer. However, she adds that there's also a possibility that he'll never have powers. Will then asks if it has happened before, and the nurse says that Ron is a typical example. Will is disappointed to hear this, and when he gets home, he tells his dad that they need to talk. Steve looks excited to speak to his son about his first day at school, so he tells Will to follow him to his secret superhero bunker. Will cannot believe this, but Steve says his son can now access the bunker because he's a certified hero. However, he tells Will never to bring anyone down there because it's a secret spot. Will says he'll never do that, and Steve then takes him down while holding the souvenir he picked up from the giant robot he and Josie fought earlier in the day. As they get there, Will looks amazed by everything down there, and Steve also shows him the souvenirs that he and Josie have picked up from their past battles. One of them is the pacifier, which belongs to a villain named Royal Pain, and Steve says it's his proudest possession. He adds that the day he dealt with the villain was the first time he saw Josie and knew he'd marry her. Will tries to touch it, but Steve stops him, and then shows him a spot he has already reserved for his son's souvenirs. He also mentions that he's happy to see that Will is now a hero, because they'll get to fight side by side in the future. As he asks Will what he wanted to say earlier, the boy says it's nothing. While they walk away, the device from the giant robot comes on, and it turns out that it has a camera which allows two of Steve's enemies to watch his every move as they try to defeat him. Later that night, Will sits on the roof of the house to think about how his day went. Layla joins him there and asks if he has told his parents that he has no powers, but he says he hasn't. He adds that he couldn't tell Steve after he showed him the secret superhero bunker. Layla says he has to tell them, and Will says he will do that eventually. He adds that he's even scared that he might never have powers, but Layla tells him not to think about it. He then asks why she seems so cool with being a sidekick when she could be a hero. Layla says she doesn't really care and that she thinks the placement process is wrong. The next day at school, Will attends hero support class with his friends. The teacher, Mr. Boy, starts the class by telling the kids that being a sidekick is not a bad job. He adds that he was once the sidekick for the commander in Jetstream. Will is surprised to hear this, and he says he didn't know his parents worked with Mr. Boy. The teacher sounds disappointed that Steve and Josie never mentioned him to their son, but he pretends to be okay with it. Shortly after, an explosion occurs in the school. But before everyone starts to panic, another teacher, Mr. Medulla, comes over to announce that it was only a small explosion from the science lab. I'll get the nerves unless she's injured. Following this, Mr. Boy starts teaching all the kids how to be good sidekicks. After the classes for the day, Will heads home with his friends, and they do their homework together. While they're at it, Steve enters the house and says he's happy to see that Will has made more friends. Will's friends then introduce themselves to Steve and tell him what they can do. Steve looks slightly disappointed to hear the powers they have, and as Will meets him in the kitchen, he tells his son that Sky High has lowered the bar for superheroes. Will says that his friends are actually sidekicks. Well, actually, he's a sidekick, and even though Steve looks shocked, he says it's a good thing for his son to mingle with them. Will then asks if his dad would be fine with him being a sidekick. Steve says it's not a problem, But as Will confesses that he's won, his dad gets pissed and thinks Boomer intentionally made his son a sidekick. As he tries to call Boomer, Will says it's not the teacher's fault and that he just doesn't have powers. Steve is shocked to hear this, but he says that Will is likely a late bloomer. Will says he doesn't really care and that he likes being a sidekick anyway. He then returns to sit with his friends, and Layla looks proud of him for finally talking to his dad about having no powers. Later that day, Steve complains to Josie about their son's condition. However, Josie doesn't seem pissed, and she tells Steve that even without superpowers, they can be the best family in the world. Steve doesn't share in her enthusiasm, and he even suggests throwing their son into a vat of toxic waste to see if he'll develop powers. However, Josie says she won't let her son be put through something that dangerous. The next day, as Will arrives at school, he sees Lash and Speed bullying Ron, and he tries to help the bus driver. However, the two bullies make fun of him for being a sidekick. Later that day, during lunch break, Lash trips Will and makes him spill his food on Warren. This gets Warren pissed, and even though Will tries to say sorry for what he did, the boy doesn't listen. Suddenly, he reveals his powers and starts throwing fireballs at Will. Luckily, Will is able to avoid getting hit, but as he's about to turn on the sprinklers in the cafeteria, Lash trips him again. Warren finally gets to Will, but the boy manages to escape and hide under a table. As Warren then asks where his fellow sidekicks are, Ethan and the others show up to defend Will. Before Warren attacks them, Will suddenly carries the table he's standing on and throws it away. Everyone realizes that Will is now super strong, and he also looks happy. He then stands up to Warren and beats him a few times, but the boy doesn't give up. Just as Warren is about to launch another attack on Will, Layla gives him a fire extinguisher, which he uses to quench Warren's fire. Principal Powers sees this, and she takes the two boys to detention. She then tells them to think about what they did and how much it could have caused harm to other students. As she walks out, Will tells Warren to let them put their parents' fights behind them. He also offers to shake hands, but Warren says he'll roast Will the next time the boy crosses his path. After school closes, Will arrives home and mistakenly breaks the door as he's about to enter the house. Even though he looks excited to tell his parents about his powers, Josie seems pissed about what Will did at school earlier in the day. Will says it wasn't his fault, but before he says anything, Steve tells him to go straight to the superhero bunker. Will looks scared that his dad is about to scold him, but as they get to the bunker, Steve congratulates his son for finally having powers. Since they also have the same powers, he sounds quite excited and gives Will an Xbox to congratulate him. However, he tells Will not to tell Josie about it because he wants her to believe he came to the bunker to scold their son. After they eventually leave, the giant robot's device comes on again, and the villains talk about Will's new powers. The next day in school, Will's friends look so proud of him. And Ethan also mentions that he has made sidekick history by having powers that even heroes will fear. Later on, while they're in class, Mr. Boyd tells Will to leave for the heroes classroom because the school management now considers him worthy of being a hero. Will doesn't want to leave his friends, but they tell him not to worry about them. They also tell him that they'll have time to talk after school. Despite still feeling sad about leaving his friends, Will heads to the heroes class taught by Mr. Medulla. The teacher welcomes him to the class and makes Gwen his lab partner, even though she's a teaching assistant. Will looks happy about this, but during the class, he doesn't seem to know what to do for a class assignment. To ensure Medulla doesn't shout at him, Gwen quickly uses her powers to help Will build his project. Medulla is impressed by it, but he soon discovers that Gwen helped Will. He then tells her to stop helping him so that he won't always rely on her. After he walks away, Will asks Gwen about her powers, and she says she's a technopath who can control technology with her mind. Will is impressed by this, and Gwen mentions that she can become his private tutor if he needs extra help with classwork. Will likes this idea, so Gwen agrees to meet him at his house the next day. Shortly after, they head for lunch break together, and they sit with some other heroes and another girl named Penny. Just as Will sees his friends enter the cafeteria, he calls them to the table, but Penny makes clones of herself and takes up the space. Layla and the others have to move elsewhere to sit, and Will looks disappointed because Penny doesn't want sidekicks to sit with them. Gwen then tells him not to be bothered by what Penny did because she's like that sometimes. After lunch, Will finds Layla and says sorry to her for what Penny did. He also promises to take her to a Chinese restaurant for dinner. Layla doesn't think he's being serious because he dislikes Chinese food, but he says he's only doing it for her. Layla is happy about this, and they agree to meet at the restaurant later that night. Shortly after, Will sees Lash and Speed bullying Ethan and Zach. They immediately stop when Will arrives, and Ethan brags about having a friend who can beat them. Zach also joins him, and together they place a bet with Lash and Speed to stop bullying them if Will wins against them at a game called Save the Citizen. Lash and Speed are fine with this, but Will thinks his friends shouldn't have placed a bet like that because he still doesn't know how to use his powers well. Despite this, Ethan and Zach seem to believe in him, and they encourage him to play the game against the bullies. Shortly after, during the game, Lash and Speed choose to be villains, and they also select Will and Warren as the heroes who will fight them. Boomer then sets up the contest, and the bullies immediately overpower Will and Warren. After a while, Will eventually captures Lash and ties him to a pole, as time is then running out for him to save the citizen. Will sees Warren struggling to breathe while Speed runs around him. Instead of trying to win the game first, Will beats Speed and saves Warren before throwing his teammate to save the citizen just as time elapses. Will and Warren win the contest, and Will's friends are happy about this. As Will then offers to shake Warren's hand, the boy just walks away and leaves the arena. That night, when Will arrives home, Steve congratulates his son for winning the game in his first year at Sky High. As he walks his son to the kitchen, they see Josie and Gwen waiting for them. Gwen then tells Will that she would like to move their private classes because she has something else to do the next day. Steve and Josie seem quite impressed that she's not only a technopath, but she's also offering to have private lessons with Will to help him with schoolwork. As Will accepts to let their lessons start that night, Steve and Josie invite Gwen to dinner, and even though she initially hesitates, she eventually agrees. While they're eating, Steve asks about Gwen's parents and if he knows them. Gwen says he might not know her parents because her mom died when she was young, and her dad is now inactive. After a while, she asks if Steve and Josie would like to attend the school's homecoming party to accept an award for Heroes of the Year. Steve and Josie are happy about this, and they agree to attend the party. Shortly after, Steve and Josie show the kids a yearbook containing pictures of their classmates at Sky High when they were students. As they look at the pictures, Josie sees that of a girl named Sue who disappeared before their graduation. Will asks why a student would do that, and Josie says there were rumors that Sue was recruiting villains in the school. Steve then sees a picture of Warren's dad and jokes about how the man always said he'd have his revenge one day. Shortly after, Will and Gwen end their private class for the night and he walks her home. When they get to the front of her house, Gwen says she's really happy that Steve and Josie have agreed to attend the homecoming party. She adds that all she needs now is a date. Will is shocked to hear that she doesn't have a date yet, but she says she has been waiting for him to ask her. Will is excited about this, and he agrees to be her date. Just then, her dad opens the door and tells his daughter to come in. As she does this, the man looks at Will strangely and tells him not to hurt his daughter. Elsewhere, Layla waits at the Chinese restaurant for a few hours, but Will doesn't show up. She still believes he'll come, so she stays there for a while. Shortly after, Warren appears to be working at the restaurant, and he asks if he can clear her table. He remembers her from school, and she also knows him, so she asks if he can sit with her. Warren doesn't seem to mind, and after he sits, Layla tells him that she was actually supposed to meet up with Will, but he didn't show up. As she keeps talking about him, Warren notices that she likes Will, so he asks why she can't just tell him. Layla initially denies it, but because she's tired of hiding her feelings, she admits that she really likes Will. She adds that she can't tell him because she thinks he likes someone else who is perfect. Despite this, Warren advises Layla to tell Will about her feelings if she really likes him. Meanwhile, the villains controlling the robot's camera look around the bunker and set their sights on getting the pacifier, which they plan to use against Steve and Josie. The next day, Will meets Layla outside his house as they're about to get on the school bus. He seems to have forgotten that they were supposed to meet last night, and Layla looks disappointed. She then says there's something she would like to tell him, but he interrupts her and says he wants to tell her something too. Layla tells him to go first, and he mentions that he's going to the homecoming party with Gwen as his date. Layla is shocked by this, but she pretends to be happy for him. As they then get on the bus, Will asks Layla what she wanted to tell him, and she mentions that she's also going to the party with Warren. This shocks Will, and as they arrive at school, he complains about her decision to go to the homecoming party with his biggest enemy. Layla says she doesn't care, and she reminds him that he didn't show up at the Chinese restaurant. She then walks away and sits with Warren in the cafeteria. Warren doesn't like this, and he asks why she's sitting with him. Layla then explains what happened and how she ended up telling Will that she also has a date. Warren doesn't seem to care, but Layla says he'll have to play along with her. Ethan, Zach, and Magenta soon join them at the table, and as Layla promises not to be unbearable, Warren agrees to pretend to be her date because it will help make Will feel bad. Later that day, as Layla sees Will and Gwen holding hands, she immediately runs to meet Warren so they can make her best friend jealous. That night, while Gwen and Will are having their private class, she receives a call from Penny, who tells her that she forgot to order the fog machine for the homecoming party. After the call ends, Gwen asks Will if she can invite some homecoming committee members to the house for a brief meeting. Will says he doesn't think so because his parents will soon be back from where they went. Gwen sounds disappointed and says she was only hoping they'd spend more time together. As she mentions that she's leaving, Will feels bad about this and tells her that inviting only a few people over is fine. Gwen is happy to hear this, but she ends up throwing a party at the house. Will doesn't look happy about this, but Gwen tells him that everyone at the party is part of the committee. She then asks if there's a place they can be alone. Will immediately thinks about the bunker, and even though he's not supposed to disobey his dad's orders, he takes Gwen inside. Gwen looks amazed by the things there, and she also walks around with Will. Meanwhile, Layla sees that there's a party at Will's house, so she goes inside to see what's happening. As she gets there, Will and Gwen are just leaving the bunker. Gwen sees Layla and immediately gets Will to head to the kitchen to bring her a drink. She and Penny then confront Layla and ask what she's doing at the party. Before Layla can respond, Gwen tells her that Will doesn't like her, and it's the reason he's going to the homecoming party with someone else. She also sounds quite rude, and Layla eventually tells Gwen to inform Will never to speak to her again. As she heads out angrily, Will sees her and asks what's wrong, but she just tells him to leave her alone. Will doesn't understand this, so he asks Gwen about it. Gwen says she only told the girl to stay away from him, but Will sounds upset and says he doesn't want to be her date anymore. Gwen doesn't take this well, but Will says he has made up his mind. As he then sends everyone out, his parents arrive home and scold him for hosting a party. Josie says she might stop him from attending the homecoming party, but Will says he's not going anyway. Steve is shocked to hear this because he really wanted his son to be with Gwen, but Will says he's not interested. Shortly after, he calls Layla and tells her to meet him at the Chinese restaurant, but the call goes to voicemail. He still goes to the restaurant to wait for her, but she doesn't show up. Just as he's about to leave, he sees Warren there and asks if he knows where Layla is. Warren asks why he should care, and Will says he knows that they're going to the homecoming party together. As Will mentions that he's not going anymore, Warren says that it's actually funny because he and Layla were only trying to make him jealous. Warren also tells Will that Layla likes him, but he says he's not sure she likes him anymore. The next day, Will refuses to go to the homecoming party, despite his mom's attempts to change his mind. As he then stays in the bunker and goes through his parents' yearbook pictures, he notices that Sue looks like Gwen. To confirm his suspicion, he checks another picture and sees her holding the pacifier. This makes him realize that she's related to Royal Pain, and as he looks for the pacifier, he sees that it's gone. Since Gwen is the only stranger that has entered the bunker, Will realizes that she must have taken it on the night of the party. Following this, he calls Ron to get a ride to Sky High. Elsewhere, Gwen presents the Hero of the Year award to Will's parents, and says she also wants to pay tribute to the greatest hero who attended Sky High. She then changes into her Royal Pain costume and says she's talking about herself. Steve and Josie are shocked to see that Royal Pain is a girl, and they wonder if she'll kill them. However, Gwen says she won't do that, and as her sidekick, Stitches, gives her the pacifier, she uses it to turn them into babies. As she then starts changing everyone in the hall to babies, Will's friends are able to escape through the vents. Coincidentally, Will arrives at Sky High and sees them inside the vents. After helping them out, he tries to explain that Gwen is a villain, but they tell him that they already know. Just as Penny, Lash, and Speed show up to fight them because they're part of Gwen's team, Warren tells Will to go after Gwen while he and the others deal with her friends. After Gwen turns nearly everyone into babies, Stitches starts loading them inside a school bus. As she holds Steve, she finally narrates how she became a villain after getting placed as a sidekick at Sky High. Despite being a talented technopath, she adds that she now wants to make a new army of villains who will rule the world. Will tries to stop her from leaving with the babies, and he tells her that she doesn't have to be like her mom, who he believes was Royal Pain. However, Gwen says she's actually Royal Pain, and that when the pacifier was destroyed, she only became a baby, and Stitches took care of her until she grew up again. Will is shocked to hear this, but Gwen then attacks him. Meanwhile, Will's friends put up a good fight against Gwen's friends, and Layla uses her powers to tie up Penny and her clones. Penny then begs for mercy and says she doesn't want to die because Gwen has sabotaged the school's anti-gravity device to make it fall from the sky. Layla is shocked to hear this, and she immediately starts planning with the others to see if they can stop the school from falling. They eventually locate an electric wire that needs to be disconnected, but Ethan mentions that only a rat would fit through the hole leading to the wire. Since Magenta can transform into one, they send her down to chew the wire before Gwen allows the school to fall. Elsewhere, Stitches is about to drive the babies away, but Ron stops him and beats him off the bus. Meanwhile, Will finally beats Gwen, but before he lands a final blow, Layla and Warren show up in the room, so he gets distracted. Gwen then punches him out of the school, but Will flies back up and shows her that he can now fly. Following this, he beats her up again, but as he doesn't finish her off, she disconnects the anti-gravity device and the school starts falling. Unfortunately, Magenta has still not chewed the wire, so Will flies down to stop the school from falling badly on Earth. Just as he manages to hold it down from collapsing on a new house, Magenta cuts the wire and Will takes the school back up. Following this, Will and his friends help turn everyone back to normal. Shortly after, Will says sorry to his parents for allowing Gwen to steal the pacifier. "I didn't do it by myself," but Steve and Josie mention that it's no longer a big deal since he helped save the day. Mr. Boy then gives Steve and Josie their award, but they give it to the sidekicks instead, because they were the true heroes who helped save the day. Elsewhere, Principal Powers locks up Gwen and her friends in detention before they're sent to jail. At the homecoming party, Medulla announces that he has destroyed the pacifier for good. Everyone sounds happy to hear this, and they all start dancing and enjoying the party. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell